On the night of my 29th birthday, exactly 47 minutes after the candles were blown out, my stepmother locked my suitcase and slid it down the front steps like trash. There were 38 guests still inside the house, music playing, glasses clinking, when my father looked at me and said, "You've taken enough from this family." If you've ever been the only person in a room who knows something is wrong but can't prove it yet, you'll understand what that felt like. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 2 weeks before that birthday. Because none of what happened that night makes sense unless you understand my aunt. My name is Vanessa Cole. I was 29, living in Cedar Falls, Iowa, working as a dental assistant, making $42,000 a year, and sharing a house that never really felt like mine. The house belonged to my father, Richard Cole. It was a 2-story colonial with beige siding and a front lawn he obsessed over. After my mom died when I was 12, it was just us for a while. Quiet, manageable, real. Then he married Linda Harper. Linda came with a smile that showed all her teeth and a son named Tyler Harper, who never looked at me directly unless he needed something. By the time I turned 18, the house had rules. Not written ones, the kind that shift under your feet. Tyler got the upstairs master bedroom. I kept my old room, the one with the window facing the driveway and the heater that clicked all winter. Tyler got a car at 17, a used Jeep. Nothing fancy, but it ran. I bought my own car at 21, a 2008 Corolla with 132,000 miles, paid off in cash after 2 years of double shifts. Linda liked to say, "We treat both kids equally." What she meant was, we expect Vanessa to handle herself. I didn't complain. I worked, I saved, I stayed out of the way. The only place I didn't feel like I was taking up space was my Aunt Margaret's house. Margaret Cole was my father's older sister, 63 years old, retired accountant, lived alone in a small brick house on Elm Street with blue shutters and a mailbox that leaned slightly to the left. Every Saturday morning for almost 4 years, I drove 12 minutes across town to see her. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. She made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I brought pastries from Dawson's Bakery, the ones with real butter, not the cheap ones. We had a routine. I'd check her mail, help organize her bills, fix whatever small thing needed fixing. A loose cabinet hinge, a flickering light. Nothing major. Then we'd sit at her kitchen table. She told me stories about my mother, stories nobody else told. What she was like at 20, how she laughed, how she used to sing in the car, off-key, windows down. My father never talked about that. Margaret did. There was something else about her that always stayed in the back of my mind. On the first day of every month, without fail, she would sit at her desk, open a small navy ledger, and write numbers. Columns, precise, careful. Then she'd close it, lock it in the drawer, and slip the key into her pocket. I asked once, "What are you tracking, Aunt Margaret?" She smiled without looking up. "Just keeping things in order." I didn't push. I wish I had. Because around the same time, my father started calling her more often. Not to check in, to offer help. "You shouldn't be handling finances alone, Margaret. It's too much." Every time, she said no, politely, firmly. One afternoon, after she hung up, I noticed her hands trembling slightly. Not weak, tense. "He means well," she said. But she didn't look at me when she said it. That was the first crack. The second came 3 months later. I was sorting her mail when I saw a bank envelope already opened on the counter. I wouldn't normally look, but a number caught my eye. A withdrawal. $9,500. "Aunt Margaret, did you take out nearly $10,000? She didn't turn around. "That's just paperwork confusion, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." I let it go. That was my mistake. A week later, I walked past her study and heard her on the phone. Her voice was low. "Make sure everything is documented, Alan. If anything happens, I want it airtight." She paused. Yes, he'll try. I froze. He'll try. She ended the call before I could ask who she meant. That night, she did something she'd never done before. She reached across the table and held my hand. Vanessa, when the time comes, there's something in my desk drawer. You take it. Don't let your father get it. Her grip tightened. Promise me. I laughed it off at first. You're not going anywhere. She didn't smile. Promise me. So I did. I promised. 10 days later, everything changed. It was a Thursday morning in early October, 8:20 a.m. I remember because I was already late for work. Margaret hadn't answered my call the night before, which was unusual, so I drove over. The front door was unlocked. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I found her in the living room, sitting in her armchair, a book open in her lap. Her glasses slightly tilted. She looked like she had just paused mid-sentence. But the room felt wrong. Still. I knew before I checked. I called 911. Then I called my father. He arrived 47 minutes later. I timed it. Not because I was angry, because I needed something solid to hold on to. His first words when he walked in weren't about her. They were about documents. Did she have a will? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Did she have a will? I watched him move through the house like a man searching for something he had already lost. Drawers opened, papers shuffled, closets checked. He didn't cry, he didn't sit down, he searched. That's when I remembered. The drawer. I walked into her study. The desk was slightly open. The lock had been forced. Inside, the navy ledger was gone, but tucked into the back corner was something else. A small envelope. My name written in her handwriting. Vanessa. Inside it was a worn bank passbook, dark blue cover, her name printed on the first page, and a note. Take this to the bank. Ask for Mr. Callahan. Trust only him. My heart started pounding. I slipped it into my bag just before my father walked in. Find anything? He asked. Just old papers. He nodded, already turning away. He searched for another hour. He never found what he was looking for. The funeral was held 4 days later. 68 people showed up. In Cedar Falls, that's nearly everyone who matters. My father wore a tailored black suit I had never seen before. Linda wore a dress that looked expensive enough to make a statement. Tyler stood in the back, scrolling on his phone. My father gave a speech about love, about family, about sacrifice. People nodded. Some even cried. I stood in the front row and said nothing, because I knew he hadn't visited her in 8 months. I knew he didn't know how she took her coffee. I knew he had already torn through her house before her body was even gone. After the service, people gathered outside. Whispers, handshakes, polite condolences. And then it happened. A man stepped forward, mid-60s, gray suit, calm expression. Alan Callahan, attorney. He walked past my father, straight to me. Your aunt wanted you to have this, he said. He handed me a sealed envelope. Before I could open it, my father's hand shot out and grabbed it. What is this? He tore it open. Inside was another passbook, identical. He flipped it open. His eyes scanned the page. Then he laughed. Not quietly. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Balance. $3,180. He shook his head and tossed it. The book landed on top of the casket, slid, and fell into the fresh dirt. It's nothing, he said. Let it stay buried. Linda covered her mouth, but I saw the smile. Tyler raised his phone and started recording. No one moved. No one said a word. So I did. I stepped forward, knelt down, picked the book up from the dirt, brushed it off slowly, carefully, like it mattered, because something in my gut told me it did. My father watched me. You want it? He said. Fine. That's all she left you. I didn't answer. I just held on to it. And that night, 47 minutes after my birthday candles burned out, he threw me out of the house. But that wasn't the moment everything changed. The moment everything changed was the next morning, when I walked into the bank. The next morning at exactly 9:12 a.m., I was sitting in the parking lot of First Midwestern Bank with $3,180 in one passbook and a second one hidden in my bag. I had slept maybe 2 hours on a borrowed couch, and my entire life fit into 2 duffel bags and 1 cardboard box. If you've ever had everything stripped down to numbers and paper, you know how quiet that kind of morning feels. I walked in at 9:17. The bank smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. 3 teller windows, a digital clock on the wall that was 2 minutes fast. There were 2 people ahead of me. I waited. When it was my turn, I slid the passbook across the counter. "I need to speak with Mr. Alan Callahan." The teller, a young guy with a name tag that said Eric, blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." He hesitated. Something in my face must have told him this wasn't optional. He picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, a woman in her early 50s stepped out from behind the offices. Short hair, glasses, sharp posture. "I'm Karen Mills, branch manager. Mr. Callahan is expecting you." Expecting me? That made my stomach tighten. She led me into a glass-walled office and closed the door. I sat down. My hands were steady, but only because I was forcing them to be. I placed the passbook from the funeral on the desk. She opened it, typed the account number into her system, paused, typed it again. Her expression didn't change immediately. It shifted slowly, like something was loading behind her eyes. She stood up. "Excuse me for a moment." She stepped out and closed the door behind her. Through the glass, I watched her walk quickly down the hall. She made a phone call, then another. Her posture stiffened. She pressed her hand against the edge of a desk. When she came back, she didn't sit right away. She looked at me carefully. "Miss Cole, where did you get this?" "My aunt left it to me." She nodded slowly. "I'm going to ask you to stay seated. Do not leave the building." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "Why?" She exhaled. "Because this account is not what it appears to be." She turned her monitor toward me. What I saw didn't make sense at first. It looked like a regular savings account, but there was a line underneath. "Linked account structure, restricted trust access." My eyes moved down. Balance: $2,904,560. I stared at the number, counted the zeros, counted again. I thought my brain was misfiring. That's wrong. Karen shook her head. "No, it's very right." My throat went dry. My aunt had a little brick house. She clipped coupons. She reused tea bags. Karen leaned forward slightly. "Your aunt established an irrevocable trust in 2015. This passbook is a physical access key. Without it, no one can initiate verification." I felt like the room tilted. An irrevocable trust? Yes. She clicked to another screen. "The trust is held under Cole Family Asset Trust. Corporate trustee is this bank. Primary beneficiary," she looked at me, "Vanessa Elise Cole." My full name. I hadn't heard it spoken like that in years. I swallowed. "How much is actually in it?" Karen didn't hesitate. $2,904,560.18. The number landed heavier the second time. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. My aunt knew. She knew someone would try to take it, and she built something that couldn't be touched. My father's face flashed in my mind. The way he threw the book, the way he laughed. He had no idea. Karen continued, "Your aunt funded this trust over time. She worked as a senior accountant for 34 years. She invested aggressively in municipal bonds and index funds." She clicked again. "In 2012, she sold commercial land outside Cedar Falls for approximately $1.6 million. I blinked. "Commercial land?" "Yes. It had been in the family since your grandfather. No one ever talked about that." Because your aunt didn't want them to. Karen paused. There's something else. Her tone changed, lower, more careful. There have been irregular transactions on a linked account. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregular? She turned the screen. 3 withdrawals, April, $8,000. July, $11,000. September, $9,500. Total, $28,500. My mind snapped to that envelope I saw on the counter. $9,500. That wasn't a mistake. Someone took it. Who? Karen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the phone. I've already contacted our compliance department. Then she looked at me. And the authorities. My pulse spiked. Authorities. These withdrawals were executed using a power of attorney. My breath caught. A power of attorney that was revoked in February of this year. Revoked. So any transaction after that, she finished the sentence calmly, is unauthorized and potentially criminal. The word hung in the air. Criminal. I sat back in the chair. Everything started lining up. My aunt's shaking hands, the phone call. Make sure it's airtight. He'll try. I looked at Karen. Whose name is on the power of attorney? She held my gaze for a second, then said it. Richard Cole. My father. The room went completely silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind where your ears ring. I let out a slow breath. Of course it was. Of course. Karen spoke again. We have documentation showing the POA was legally revoked, signed, notarized, and filed. She slid a document across the desk. Date, February 18th, 3 months before the first withdrawal. He knew. He knew he didn't have authority anymore. And he did it anyway. A sentence formed in my head, clear, sharp. He didn't make a mistake. He stole. There's something I need to ask you, Karen said. Were you aware of any of these transactions? No, I saw one statement. She told me it was a mistake. Karen nodded. We're going to need a formal statement from you. I nodded back. Okay. She stood. And I need to ask you again. Do not leave the building. Why does that matter? Because once this is formally opened, she paused, this becomes a criminal investigation. I sat there, staring at the numbers on the screen. 2.9 million. 28,500 missing. A revoked power of attorney. My father's name. Everything I thought I understood about my life shifted in that moment. Not exploded. Shifted. Like a foundation cracking quietly under the surface. Let me ask you something. If you found out your own parent had been taking money from someone who trusted them, would you confront them immediately? Or would you wait and make sure you had everything first? Tell me in the comments. Because I didn't call him. Not yet. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something inside me stayed still, cold, controlled. The same feeling I had when I picked that book up from the dirt. I wasn't going to react. I was going to understand. Fully. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about intent. And intent leaves patterns. Karen returned with 2 people, one in uniform, one in plain clothes. The man in plain clothes introduced himself, Detective Harris, Financial Crimes Division. He sat across from me, opened a notebook. Miss Cole, we're going to go through a few things step by step. I nodded. My voice didn't shake. Okay. But as he started asking questions, one thought kept repeating in my head. My father didn't just try to take everything. He thought he already had. And that meant one thing. He was going to fight when he realized he hadn't. And I wasn't even close to seeing how far he was willing to go. At 6:38 p.m. that same day, my phone rang 3 times in under 2 minutes, all from my father, right after the detective left the bank. He never called me more than once unless something was wrong. This time, something was very wrong. I let it ring. If you've ever had someone who only reaches for you when they're cornered, you know that sound. Before I tell you what he said when I finally picked up, Take a second to like and subscribe if this story is pulling you in. And tell me where you're watching from. I read those more than you think. I didn't answer until the fourth call. Hello? Vanessa, we need to talk. His voice was tight, not angry, controlled, which was worse. About what? Don't play games with me. You went to the bank. So he knew. Of course he knew. The question was how. I kept my voice even. I went because Aunt Margaret told me to. A pause, then a shift, softer. Listen, things are being misunderstood. Misunderstood. That word. It told me everything. I leaned back against the couch at Peggy's house, the same couch I'd slept on the night before. What exactly is being misunderstood, Dad? Another pause, longer this time. Then he said it. That account, it's complicated. No, it wasn't. You withdrew $28,500 using a power of attorney that was revoked. Silence. Heavy. Then, your aunt was confused. There it was, stage 1, denial wrapped in concern. I closed my eyes for a second. She wasn't confused. She was sick. That's different. Vanessa, you weren't there for everything. I almost laughed. I was there every week. You were there 3 times in a year. His voice sharpened. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point is I was helping her. Helping her. By taking money she didn't authorize. By using legal authority you didn't have. My voice stayed calm, but inside, something had shifted. This wasn't a conversation. It was a performance, and I could see the script. He exhaled hard. You don't understand how these things work. Then explain it to me. He didn't. Instead, he pivoted. Stage 2. Blame. You've always had a problem with me, Vanessa. There it is. This isn't about me. It's about you going behind my back. Behind your back. My grip tightened slightly on the phone. You mean going to the bank my aunt told me to go to? You should have come to me first. Why? So you could explain it before I saw the numbers? Another silence, shorter this time. He was adjusting. I could feel it. Then came stage 3, the one that always worked on other people. Victim. I'm your father. His voice cracked slightly. I just lost my sister, and now my own daughter is treating me like a criminal. There it was. Clean, simple, effective. For a second, it almost worked. Because a part of me still remembered the man who made pancakes on Saturdays. The man who sat on the kitchen floor after my mom died. But then, another memory pushed forward. Him throwing that book onto the casket. Him laughing in front of 68 people. And something inside me locked into place. Calm, cold, controlled. If you're innocent, the investigation will show that. I said it quietly. He didn't respond right away. Then, you're really doing this. I didn't start anything. The bank flagged it. The police opened it. I'm just not stopping it. His breathing changed, faster. You know what this will do to me? Yes, I did. But I also knew something else. He knew too. Maybe you should have thought about that before taking the money. The line went dead. He hung up. I sat there for a full minute, staring at nothing. Then I placed the phone face down on the table. Peggy was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had heard enough to understand. He called? I nodded. What did he say? I looked at her. He's scared. She didn't smile. Good. That word landed heavier than expected. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Let me ask you something. If someone only regrets what they did after they get caught, is that regret real? Or is it just fear? I want to know what you think, because I was still figuring that out myself. The next morning, everything escalated, fast. At 8:10 a.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. This is Daniel Brooks, attorney for Richard Cole. Of course, that didn't take long. He continued. My client would like to resolve this matter privately. Privately. meaning quietly, meaning without consequences. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Resolve what, exactly? A misunderstanding regarding financial authority. There it was again. Misunderstanding. Your client used a revoked power of attorney. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud. A slight pause. Then, we believe there are contextual factors that would be beneficial to discuss. Translation. We want to control the narrative. I kept my voice neutral. I'm not interested in discussing anything without legal representation. Another pause. Longer this time. Smart, he adjusted quickly. Of course, in that case, we'll proceed accordingly. Meaning court. Meaning escalation. The call ended. Peggy set a cup of coffee in front of me. You're going to need a lawyer. I nodded. I already knew who. Alan Callahan, the man my aunt trusted. By noon, I was sitting in his office, second floor, brick building, the kind of place that smelled like paper and time. He didn't waste time. Your aunt came to me in 2015, he folded his hands. She said one sentence I wrote down immediately. He looked at me. My brother will try to take everything. Build this so he can't. I felt something tighten in my chest. She knew. Years ago. He continued. The trust is structured to be untouchable. Corporate trustee, no individual control, no contest clause. He slid a document across the desk. Irrevocable, unbreakable. Unless, he paused. Unless someone tries to challenge it using claims of undue influence or mental incapacity. I looked up. Will he try that? He met my eyes. Yes. And that's when he showed me something that changed everything. A medical evaluation. Dated the same month the trust was created. Your aunt scored in the 95th percentile for cognitive function. Clear mind. Clear intent. Documented. He slid another file. And this. Bank records. Every withdrawal. Every date. Every signature. All under your father's name. Not alleged. Not suspected. Recorded. Then he turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a video. Kyle, at the funeral. Filming. My father grabbing the passbook. Laughing. Throwing it. It's nothing. Let it stay buried. Alan leaned back slightly. Your cousin just gave us one of the strongest pieces of evidence we could ask for. I stared at the screen. Kyle thought it was funny. He posted it for attention. He didn't realize what he captured. My father's truth. Unfiltered. Unmasked. In front of everyone. That's when Alan said something I won't forget. Some people destroy themselves. You just have to not get in their way. I sat there, absorbing everything. The trust, the investigation, the evidence, the pattern. And for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was thinking ahead, because this wasn't going to end quietly. Not with my father, not with Linda, not with everything at stake. And as I left that office, one thought stayed with me. This wasn't just about proving what he did. It was about deciding how far I was willing to let him go before I stopped him. 3 days later, at exactly 7:26 p.m., my stepmother sent a group text to 14 relatives, inviting everyone to a Sunday dinner I wasn't included in. 22 minutes after that, my Aunt Carol forwarded it to me with one line. You should probably know what they're planning. If you've ever watched people build a version of you in a room you're not in, you know how quiet that kind of message feels. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, take a second to like and subscribe if this story is hitting something real for you. And tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. I notice patterns in where these stories land. I read the message again. Sunday, 6 p.m. Family only. Time to clear the air. Family only. I wasn't family anymore. Not when there was money involved. Carol called me 10 minutes later. Her voice was lower than usual. Vanessa, I don't like this. What's happening? She hesitated. Your dad has been calling everyone. Of course he has. What is he saying? Another pause. That your aunt wasn't in her right mind. That you were involved. Involved. The word landed like something sticky, vague enough to spread, sharp enough to cut. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Peggy was at the stove behind me, stirring something slowly, pretending not to listen. He's saying I manipulated her? Carol exhaled. He's saying you were around her a lot at the end. He's implying things. Implying. That's how it starts. You don't accuse, you suggest, and let people fill in the rest. I closed my eyes for a second. How many people believe him? Carol didn't answer right away. Some do, some don't. That was honest. More honest than most people would be. I appreciated that. He wants you there Sunday. Of course he does. Public pressure, controlled environment, audience. I almost smiled. Tell him I'll think about it. After we hung up, Peggy turned off the stove. You're going. It wasn't a question. I looked at her. Am I? She nodded. Yes, because whatever they're planning, it won't stay contained in that room. She was right. In a town like Cedar Falls, nothing stays contained. Not stories, not rumors, not reputations. I sat down at the table. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Miss Cole, this is Detective Harris. My posture straightened automatically. Yes? We've completed a preliminary review of the account activity. My pulse slowed. Controlled. And? There's enough evidence to proceed. Proceed, meaning formal investigation. Meaning this was no longer just internal. We'll be contacting your father for an official statement tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? I glanced at the calendar. Saturday. The dinner was Sunday. Timing. Perfect. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Understood. There was a pause. Then his voice shifted slightly. More direct. Miss Cole, I'm going to ask you something off the record. Go ahead. Do you believe your father knew the power of attorney had been revoked? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because my aunt told me he would try. Silence. Then, that's helpful. The call ended. I sat there for a moment. Everything was aligning. Too cleanly, too precisely. Like my aunt had set pieces on a board years ago, and now they were moving exactly where she expected. Let me ask you something. If someone warned you about a betrayal before it happened, would you believe them? Or would you wait until it hurt to understand they were right? I didn't answer that question when she first said it. Now I knew. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, because I was thinking. Patterns, timelines, motives. I wrote everything down. Dates of withdrawals, dates of visits, dates of phone calls. What I remembered, what I missed, what I ignored. By 2:14 a.m., and one thing was clear. This wasn't random. It was systematic, careful, and it had been going on longer than I thought. Sunday came cold and gray. I dressed simply. Dark jeans, light sweater, no makeup. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't need to perform. Peggy handed me a folder before I left. Inside were copies, bank records, revocation documents, the trust summary. Not weapons, facts, just in case. I drove to my father's house at 5:52 p.m. Same driveway, same porch, same light fixture that flickered slightly on the right side. I hadn't been there since the night he pushed my suitcase down those steps. I parked, sat for a moment, then got out. The door was already open. Linda stood there, smile in place, Vanessa, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been thrown out 3 days earlier. I stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken and something artificial, vanilla, too strong, too deliberate. There were 13 people in the dining room. Long table, white tablecloth, candles. My father stood at the head. He looked prepared. That was the word. Not emotional, not angry. Prepared. This was a setup. I felt it immediately. Carol gave me a small nod. A few others looked at me with curiosity, some with caution. Tyler didn't look at me at all. He was on his phone. Of course. Linda guided me to a seat at the far end of the table, next to the wall. Positioning. Always positioning. Dinner started normally. Small talk, weather, work, safe topics. Then, right on cue, my father stood up. He tapped his glass lightly. The room quieted. I watched him, not as his daughter, as an observer. Before we eat, I want to say something. Of course you do. He looked around the table, made eye contact with each person. Controlled, measured. As you all know, we've had a difficult week. He paused, let it settle. Margaret's passing has been hard on all of us. He glanced at me, especially when confusion is involved. There it was. Not direct, not yet. Confusion. He continued. Margaret was not always herself toward the end. A few heads nodded, subtle but visible. And sometimes, when people are vulnerable, he looked at me again. They can be influenced. There it was, clear now. The room shifted. Not loudly, but enough. I didn't move, didn't speak. Not yet. Linda stepped in smoothly. We just want what's fair. Fair. That word again. So flexible, so convenient. Tyler finally looked up. Yeah, I mean, it's not right if someone takes advantage of family. Someone, not naming me, letting the room do it. Smart, calculated. I felt every eye on me, waiting, judging, measuring. This was the moment, the one they built, the one they expected me to fold in, to explain, to defend, to react. Instead, I reached for my glass of water, took a sip, set it down. Slowly. Then I looked at my father and said one sentence. You want to talk about influence? The room went completely still. He didn't expect that. Not that tone, not that calm. I leaned back slightly, then let the next words land. Let's talk about the power of attorney you used after it was revoked. Silence. Not quiet. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Carol's hand froze midair. Linda's smile disappeared. Tyler blinked. My father didn't move. Not yet. But I saw it. The smallest crack, right behind his eyes. And for the first time, I realized something. He thought he was in control of this room. He thought he had already won. He had no idea what I was about to say next. And neither did anyone else. At exactly 6:18 p.m., with 13 people sitting around that table and the food still untouched, my father said the word liar before I had even finished my sentence. 2 seconds later, my stepbrother reached for his phone again, not to scroll this time, but to record. If you've ever watched someone realize they're losing control of a room they carefully staged, you know how fast things can turn. Before I show you exactly how that moment unfolded, take a second to like and subscribe if you're still with me, and tell me what you would have done sitting at that table, because I promise you, it's not as simple as it sounds. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I just looked at him. Dad, you used a power of attorney that was revoked on February 18th. He laughed, sharp, dismissive. That's not true. Stage 1 again, denial. I nodded slightly. Okay. I reached down beside my chair, pulled the folder onto my lap. Slow, deliberate. Every movement mattered now. Every second stretched. Carol leaned forward slightly. Linda's fingers tightened around her napkin. Tyler's phone was angled perfectly. Recording. Good. I opened the folder, took out one page, just one, and placed it on the table. Centered, not pushed at him, not dramatic, just there. This is the revocation document, signed, notarized, filed with the bank, February 18th. No one spoke, not even my father, so I continued. Then I placed a second sheet beside it. These are the withdrawals, April, 8,000. July, 11,000. September, 9,500. Total, $28,500. I didn't rush the numbers. I let them land, one by one, like weight. The room shifted. You could feel it, physically, like pressure changing. My father's jaw tightened. That's taken out of context. Stage 2. Blame. Context. I looked at him. What context makes unauthorized withdrawals legal? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. Linda jumped in. Vanessa, this isn't the time. No. My voice cut clean. This is exactly the time. Silence again. He was losing the room, and he knew it. So he escalated. Stage 3. Victim. I took care of her. His voice rose. I handled things she couldn't handle anymore. There it was. Justification. Wrapped in sacrifice. I nodded slowly. You took money after she legally removed your authority. That's not taking care of someone. That's taking from them. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone shifted in their chair. Small sounds, but loud in that kind of silence. Carol spoke, soft. Richard, is that true? He didn't look at her. He looked at me. Always at me, because I was the threat. You don't understand how complicated this was. Still avoiding, still circling. So I made it simple. The bank understands. The police understand. That word hit. Police. Linda's head snapped toward me. What did you just say? I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on him. The bank reported it. There's an investigation. You've been contacted, or you will be. I watched it happen. The exact moment it landed. Not the words, the reality. His breathing changed, slightly faster. His shoulders stiffened, and for the first time since I walked in, he looked uncertain. Tyler lowered his phone a fraction. Linda's face went pale. Carol leaned back slowly. Let me ask you something. When the truth finally enters a room full of people who are comfortable believing a lie, who do they turn on first? The liar or the person who exposed it? Because I didn't know yet which way this was going to go, my father stood up suddenly, chair scraping hard against the floor. This is insane. His voice was louder now, not controlled anymore. You're twisting everything. Stage 4. Attack. I stayed seated, composed. Then explain it. He pointed at the papers. That doesn't show intent. It shows action. Same thing. No, different things. I leaned forward slightly. Intent explains action. So explain yours. The room held its breath. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing. Because there was no explanation that worked. Not in front of witnesses, not with documents on the table. Linda stepped in again. This is a family matter. It should be handled privately. There it was. Control the setting. Remove the audience. Too late. It stopped being private when the bank got involved. I said it calmly. Then I added one more sentence, the kind that stays with people. The truth doesn't need privacy. That landed. You could see it. Carol looked at me differently now. Not confused, not cautious. Certain. Tyler looked down at his phone. Not recording anymore. Processing. Linda looked at my father. Waiting. He had one move left, and I knew it before he made it. Collapse into emotion. He sat back down slowly, rubbed his face. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. I was trying to help her. Not strong, not convincing, but human. For a second, the room softened. That's how it works, not through logic, through emotion. But I didn't let it take over. Helping someone doesn't require hiding transactions. He didn't respond, because he couldn't. Carol spoke again, stronger this time. Richard, did she know? The question, the real one. Did Margaret know her money was being taken? My father stared at the table. Silence. That was the answer. Not yes, not no. Silence. And in that silence, everything shifted. Completely. I closed the folder, not abruptly, just enough to signal something. This part is done. I didn't come here to fight. I said it quietly. I came because you invited me, because you wanted everyone to hear your version. Now they've heard mine. I stood up, slow, controlled. No rush, no anger, just finality. I picked up my coat. And then I said one more thing, the second line that people later repeated back to me. You didn't lose control tonight. You just lost the illusion of it. No one stopped me. No one spoke. As I walked toward the door, I felt it, the shift behind me. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. And just before I stepped outside, Carol's voice broke the silence. Vanessa. I turned slightly. She was looking at my father, not me, and she asked the one question that mattered more than anything I had said. What else don't we know? I didn't stay to hear his answer, because something told me that question was about to open a door none of us were ready for. At 9:03 a.m. the next morning, exactly 14 hours after that dinner ended, 2 county investigators knocked on my father's front door with a formal request for records. By 9:27, he had called me 6 times. If you've ever watched someone go from confident to desperate overnight, you know how fast the tone changes. Before I tell you what he said when I finally answered, take a second to like and subscribe if this story still has you here. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed at that table longer or walked out when I did? I let the phone ring twice more before picking up. Hello? Vanessa, please. No control this time. No script, just fear. They're at the house. I didn't ask who. I already knew. You need to fix this. Fix this. Like it was something I started. Like it was mine to undo. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Peggy was across the room, watching me carefully. I can't fix something I didn't do. His breathing was uneven. You went to the bank. You told them things. I told them the truth. That's what triggered this. No, I said it quietly. What triggered this was you taking money you didn't have the right to take. Silence. Then, they're asking for documents, bank statements, records. He sounded smaller, like the walls were closing in. Then give them what they're asking for. You don't understand. I do, more than you think. Another pause. Then he said something that changed the direction of everything. There's more. My grip tightened slightly. More what? He hesitated. Too long. Then, just transactions. Transactions. That word again. Vague. Careful. Controlled. My chest went still. How much more? He didn't answer directly. Not right away. Then, I don't know the exact number. That was a lie. I could hear it. Feel it. People don't forget numbers like that. Especially not when they're afraid of them. I closed my eyes for a second. How long, Dad? Another pause. Then, since last year. My stomach dropped. Last year. Not 3 withdrawals. Not 28,500. This was bigger. A lot bigger. You told me there were 3. I didn't tell you anything. That's right. He didn't. The bank did. Which meant there were transactions they hadn't caught yet, or ones that hadn't surfaced, or ones tied to something else entirely, a different account, a different method, a different layer. The second tier, the one my aunt warned about. He'll try. I opened my eyes. How much? This time he answered. 42. 42,000? No, 42,000 more. The room felt smaller. 70,000, total. At least. At least, meaning it could be higher. Meaning this wasn't slipping. This was a system. Careful, repeated, intentional. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Not emotional, not angry, just direct. Why did you do it? He exhaled slowly. Because I needed it. There it was. No excuse, no story, just need. For what? Silence. Then, the house. The house, of course. The renovation, the one Linda pushed, the kitchen, the floors, the things that made it look better from the outside, while everything inside was breaking. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. You used her money to pay for your house. I was going to pay it back. When? He didn't answer. Because there was no when. Because people don't plan to return money they think they deserve. They justify it, reframe it, rename it. Helping, borrowing, managing. Anything but what it is. Stealing. Let me ask you something. When someone says they were going to pay it back, do you believe them? Or do you believe they're just trying to make it sound less final? Because in that moment, I didn't believe him. Not anymore. Vanessa, his voice cracked again. You have to talk to them. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I almost smiled. We're back to that word. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was multiple transactions over more than a year. He raised his voice slightly. I'm your father. And I'm your daughter. I said it evenly. And that's exactly why you shouldn't have done this. Silence. Long. Heavy. Then. They said it could be a felony. Not could be. It is. Another pause. Then something shifted. Again. The final stage. Collapse. If I go down for this, his voice broke, it'll ruin everything. I closed my eyes. You already did. The line went quiet. Not disconnected, just nothing. Then he hung up. I stood there for a full minute, phone still in my hand. Peggy stepped closer. There's more, isn't there? I nodded. 70,000. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not surprised, just confirming something she already suspected. Your aunt knew. I looked at her. How? Peggy walked to the cabinet, opened a drawer, pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table. I unfolded it. It was a list. Dates, amounts, neat handwriting. Margaret's. Every transaction, every withdrawal, all of them. Not just the ones the bank found. More, several more, smaller amounts, spread out, careful, hidden. My heart started beating slower, not faster, slower, controlled. She documented everything. Peggy nodded. Quiet people always do. I stared at the list. This wasn't just evidence. This was intention. She knew, before anyone else, before the bank, before me. She was building something, not revenge, protection, and accountability, at the same time. I folded the paper carefully, slid it back across the table. This changes things. Peggy met my eyes. No, she said it calmly. It reveals things. That landed, because she was right. Nothing changed. This had always been there. I just hadn't seen it yet. My phone buzzed again. A message this time, from an unknown number. Daniel Brooks, attorney. We need to discuss immediate resolution options. Of course. Now they wanted resolution. Now they wanted quiet. Now they wanted control. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about proving what he did. That part was already happening. This was about deciding how much of it would be seen, and how much of it would stay buried. I looked back at the list, at the dates, at the numbers, at the pattern. And one thought settled in. Cold, precise, unavoidable. If the full truth came out, it wouldn't just end my father's reputation. It would expose everything he had been hiding. And I wasn't sure yet if I was ready to open that door. At 2:11 a.m. that night, I was still awake, sitting at Peggy's kitchen table with a list of 17 transactions my aunt had written in her own hand. totaling $72,840. I had read it 5 times. The numbers didn't change. If you've ever reached the point where the truth stops shocking you and starts organizing itself, you know what that kind of silence feels like. Before I tell you what I decided to do next, take a second to like and subscribe if you've made it this far. And tell me in the comments, would you expose everything at once or hold something back? Because that was the question in front of me. Not whether he was guilty. That part was already clear. The question was timing. And timing is power. I spread the papers out across the table. Bank records, revocation notice, the list. My aunt's handwriting. Every number aligned, every date made sense. This wasn't panic behavior. This was controlled, documented, anticipated. She knew he would keep going, and she let him. That realization didn't feel good. It felt strategic. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel emotional. I felt still, not numb, not overwhelmed, still, like something had settled into place. That's when I understood something important. This wasn't my fight anymore. Not in the way I thought. This was a process, already in motion, already structured. All I had to do was not interfere with it. I gathered the papers carefully, stacked them, aligned the edges, put them back into the folder. No rushing, no shaking hands, just control. Peggy watched me from the doorway. "You're different tonight." I looked up. "How?" She stepped closer, calmer. I nodded. "Because now I know where this goes." She studied me for a moment. And I don't need to push it. That was the shift. Up until now, I had been reacting, responding, defending. Now, I was waiting. And waiting, when done right, is not passive. It's precise. The next morning, I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I didn't respond to the lawyer. I went to work. Same clinic, same patients, same routine. 20-hour shift, blood pressure checks, medication reviews, conversations about things that actually mattered. Life, health, time. It grounded me. Because outside that clinic, everything felt like strategy. Inside it, everything was simple, real. At 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed in my locker. 3 missed calls. My father. 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. At 2:15 p.m., another message. Unknown number. "We need to talk before this escalates further." I recognized the tone. Urgency, controlled panic. Still trying to manage, still trying to contain. I closed my locker, went back to work. Because here's something I learned in that moment. Silence isn't empty. It's pressure. And pressure forces people to reveal themselves. By the time my shift ended at 6:08 p.m., there were 9 missed calls, 4 voicemails, 3 messages, all from different angles. My father, the attorney, Linda. Different voices, same intention. Get me to respond. I didn't. Not yet. I drove back to Peggy's. The sky was already dark, cold, still. The kind of night where sound carries. I parked, sat in the car for a moment, and finally, I played the first voicemail. "Vanessa, please call me." His voice, tired, not controlled anymore. "I need to explain something." Explain, not defend. Explain. That was new. I played the second. "We can fix this." Fix. Still holding on to that word. I played the third. "You don't understand everything that's going on." There it was, the hint, the opening. Not everything. Which meant there was more. I didn't play the fourth. I didn't need to. I already knew where this was going. Inside, Peggy was at the table again. Same spot, same lamp. She looked up. "Anything new?" I nodded. "He says there's more." She didn't look surprised. Of course there is. I sat down across from her. "What kind of more?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked me something. "What do you think?" I thought about it. Not emotionally, logically. Patterns, escalation, behavior. If he took money directly, he probably did something else to cover it. Peggy nodded slowly. Go on. Maybe moved funds between accounts. Maybe used someone else's name. Maybe. I stopped. The thought clicked into place. Loans. Peggy's eyes sharpened slightly. Say it. I leaned forward. He might have taken out loans using her financial information. Silence. Not shocked, not surprised, confirmed. Peggy sat back. Your aunt mentioned something like that once. My chest tightened. When? A few months ago, she said she got a letter about a line of credit she didn't remember opening. Everything inside me went still again. Not panic, clarity. That's it. That's the next layer. Tier 2. Not just withdrawals, not just access. Expansion. Using her identity, using her credit. Building something bigger, without her knowledge. I stood up, slowly. I need to go back to the bank. Peggy didn't stop me, she just nodded, because she understood. This wasn't about reacting anymore. This was about uncovering, piece by piece, layer by layer. Before I left, she said one thing, quiet but sharp. Once you see all of it, you won't be able to unsee it. I looked at her. I know. And for the first time, I meant it. I drove straight to the bank. It was closed. Of course it was. 7:02 p.m. Lights off. Days locked. But I didn't leave. I sat in the parking lot, engine off, hands still on the wheel. And I replayed everything. The withdrawals, the list, the phone calls, the fear in his voice. There's more. Not everything. Explain. The pieces were there. They just hadn't been connected yet. And then, my phone buzzed again. A new message. Not from him, not from the lawyer, from an unknown number. Just one sentence. Check the credit file. No name, no explanation, no context. I stared at it, then read it again. Check the credit file. My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. Because I knew exactly what that meant. And more importantly, I knew who sent it. Not a stranger. Someone watching. Someone who knew. Someone who had been quiet. Until now. I looked back at the dark bank building, then down at the message, and one thought settled in. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that locks in place. If the credit file showed what I thought it would, this wasn't just theft anymore. This was something else entirely. And whatever I was about to uncover next was the part my father was truly afraid of. At 8:41 a.m. the next morning, I requested my aunt's credit report, using the authorization forms Alan Callahan prepared. And within 11 minutes, 3 accounts appeared that shouldn't have existed. One of them had a balance of $64,200. If you've ever watched numbers confirm a suspicion you didn't want to be right about, you know how quiet your body goes before your mind catches up. Before I walk you through what those accounts revealed, take a second to like and subscribe if this story is earning it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever discovered something about a family member that changed how you saw them forever? I was back in the same glass-walled office at First Midwestern Bank. Karen Mills closed the door behind us. Alan Callahan sat to my left, calm as ever, a legal pad already filled with notes. "We don't rush this," he said. "We verify." I nodded. Because this wasn't about reacting anymore. This was about building something airtight. Karen turned her monitor toward us. Credit file pulled under Margaret Cole. 3 active lines. She pointed to the first. Home equity line of credit, opened May last year. Balance, $64,200. My chest tightened slightly. That house had no mortgage. My aunt paid it off in 2008. There should be no line of credit attached to it. Karen nodded. There shouldn't. She clicked to the next. Personal line of credit, opened August. Balance, $18,700. Then the third. Credit card, opened under a secondary authorization. Balance, $9,400. I didn't need to do the math. I already knew. Over $92,000, not including the withdrawals, not including anything we hadn't found yet. Alan spoke quietly. Total exposure so far, approximately $165,000. Exposure, not loss, not yet, but close. I leaned forward slightly. Who opened them? Karen zoomed in on the application records. Each one required identity verification, social security number, date of birth, signature, all matching Margaret Cole. But the contact phone number, she paused, was updated before each application. Updated to what? Karen looked at me. A number registered to your father. There it was, clean, direct, documented. Not assumption, not accusation, evidence. Alan wrote something down, then looked at me. Your aunt didn't just suspect, she knew. I nodded slowly. She documented everything. Karen pulled up another screen. There's more. Of course there is. She clicked. Login activity, online access, IP addresses, timestamps, multiple logins over the past year, all originating from one location, your father's home network. No ambiguity, no room to explain, no room to twist. This wasn't help, this wasn't confusion. This was systematic, planned, executed, and hidden. I sat back in the chair, my hands rested in my lap, still, composed, but inside, everything aligned. The list, the calls, the fear. There's more. Yes, there was, and now I could see it clearly. He didn't just take money, he built access, expanded it, used her identity to create more. That's not impulse, that's intent. Let me ask you something. At what point does someone stop being desperate and start being calculated? Because this didn't feel desperate anymore. It felt designed. Alan closed his notebook. This moves us into identity fraud. His tone didn't change, but the weight did. Felony, multiple counts, potentially federal, depending on how the credit was issued. Karen added quietly, and because she's over 60, it qualifies as elder financial exploitation. Enhanced penalties, stacked charges. I exhaled slowly. Not relief, not shock, just confirmation. What happens next? Alan answered. We document everything. We provide it to the investigator. And then we wait. Wait. There it was again. The strategy. Not rushing, not pushing. Let the system move. Because now, the system had everything it needed. Karen printed the reports, each page clean, clear, unavoidable. I stacked them carefully, aligned the edges, slid them into the folder, same way I had the night before. Control, precision, no wasted motion. My phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I did anyway. My father, of course. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I looked at Alan. When do we give this to Detective Harris? He met my eyes. Today. Good, because timing matters. And this was the second layer. The one that changes everything. We left the office together. The air outside was cold, sharp, clear. I took a breath. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I stopped walking, listened. Vanessa, please. His voice was different now, not controlled, not pleading, something else. There are things you don't know. I almost smiled. You're right, there are. But I'm finding them. He continued. Linda doesn't know everything. That made me pause, not because I believed him, because of what it implied. Division, blame shifting, the beginning of collapse. Stage 4. He's trying to separate himself. I ended the message, didn't listen to the rest, because I didn't need to. I already knew what was coming. When people start saying, you don't know everything, what they mean is, you're getting close. Let me ask you something. If someone who hurt you suddenly starts offering pieces of the truth, Do you trust them? Or do you assume they're only giving you what benefits them? Because in that moment, I didn't trust anything he said. Not a word. We drove straight to the county office, Financial Crimes Division. Detective Harris met us in a small conference room. No windows, neutral walls, a table too big for 3 people. I placed the folder in front of him. Didn't speak, didn't explain. Just opened it, turned it toward him, and let the evidence speak. He flipped through the pages, one by one, slow, careful, professional. But I saw it, the shift in his expression. Subtle, but there. From routine to serious. He closed the folder, looked at me. Miss Cole, this just escalated significantly. I nodded. I figured. He tapped the folder once. This is no longer just unauthorized withdrawals. No, it wasn't. He continued. This is identity fraud, financial exploitation, and potentially multiple felony counts. The words landed clean. No emotion, just fact. What happens now? He leaned back slightly. Now, we move forward formally. Formal charges, investigation expansion, subpoenas, search warrants if needed. Everything. Everything. That word echoed, because everything meant nothing stayed hidden anymore. I stood up, not rushed, not dramatic, just ready. As we walked out of that building, I felt it, the shift, again, bigger this time, final. There was no going back now, not for him, not for anyone involved. And as I stepped into the cold air, one thought settled in, clear, unavoidable. The truth wasn't just coming out anymore. It was about to be exposed, publicly. And when it did, it wouldn't just break him. It would show everyone exactly who he had been, long before I ever knew. At 4:56 p.m. on Thursday, 5 days before Thanksgiving, Detective Harris called to tell me a warrant had been approved to pull every financial record tied to my father over the past 18 months. At 5:03 p.m., my Aunt Carol texted me 3 words. He knows everything. If you've ever watched the moment right before something breaks open completely, you know how still the air gets. Before I tell you what he did next, take a second to like and subscribe if this story has you thinking. And tell me in the comments, would you confront someone before everything is revealed, or let the truth arrive on its own? Because at this point, I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was letting it come. I called Carol. What happened? She didn't waste time. They came to the house. Who? Investigators. My grip tightened slightly. What did they take? Documents, a laptop, some files from the office. Office. That mattered. My father ran a small contracting business out of the house. Cash flow, invoices, accounts. Another layer. Carol continued. Linda was there. How did she react? A pause. Not well. Of course not. What about him? Longer pause. He tried to stay calm. Tried. Past tense. Then they started asking about the credit lines. I closed my eyes for a second. And? He said he didn't know what they were talking about. Stage 1 again. Denial. Even now, even with everything. And Linda? Carol exhaled slowly. That's when things changed. Changed how? She didn't know about the credit accounts. There it was, the fracture, the one he hinted at. Linda doesn't know everything. Now she did. What did she say? Carol's voice dropped slightly. She asked him what else he was hiding. The same question Carol asked at dinner, now inside his own house. Different audience, same impact. And his answer? Silence. Again. Always silence when the truth corners him. I leaned back in my chair. It's happening. Carol didn't respond. She didn't need to. We both knew. This wasn't contained anymore. This was spreading. Inside the family. Inside the house. Inside his own marriage. Let me ask you something. When someone who helped build the lie realizes they weren't told the whole truth, Who do they turn on first? The person exposed or the person who exposed them? Because Linda had been on his side from the beginning. Now, that was shifting. After I hung up, I didn't move for a while. I just sat there, letting it settle. The investigation, the warrant, the fracture, everything aligning. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was him. Not a call, a message. We need to meet, tonight. No explanation, no tone, just direct. I stared at it. Then another message came. Please. That word again. Different now. Not persuasive. Not strategic. Desperate. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit. 10 minutes. 15. 20. Then I replied. Where? The answer came fast. The old diner on Route 6. Of course. Neutral ground. Public. Controlled. He still needed control, even now. I arrived at 7:12 p.m. He was already there. Booth in the back, facing the door. Always facing the door. I slid into the seat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked older. Not physically. Worn. Like something had been stripped away. You're not answering my calls, he said it flat. I've been busy. He nodded slowly. Right. A waitress came by. Coffee? I shook my head. He said yes. Of course he did. Routine, familiar, something to hold on to. Once she left, he leaned forward slightly. They took my laptop. I didn't respond. They're going through everything. I know. That caught him off guard. Of course I know. He exhaled slowly. Vanessa, this is getting out of control. No, I said it calmly. It's getting exposed. That landed. He looked down at the table, then back at me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. That sentence. People say it like distance changes intent, like length of time changes truth. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked one question. How many accounts? He froze. Just for a second. Then, I told you, no, I cut him off. Don't guess, don't minimize. How many? Silence. The diner hummed quietly around us. Plates, voices, normal life. And then, 5. 5. Not 3, not 1, 5. Total? He swallowed. Around 120. 120,000. Not counting interest, not counting fees, not counting anything else we hadn't found yet. I nodded slowly. You used her identity. Not a question, a statement. He didn't deny it. This time, no denial. No excuse. Just quiet. That was new. Why? Again, simple, direct. He rubbed his face. Because I could. There it was, the truth. Not dressed up, not softened. Because I could. Power, access, opportunity. That's all it took. Let me ask you something. When someone finally tells the truth, but it's uglier than any lie they told before, is that honesty or just surrender? Because sitting there, I didn't feel closure. I felt clarity. And clarity isn't always comforting. He looked at me again. You can stop this. No, you can. You can tell them it was authorized, that she knew. I almost smiled. Even now. Still trying, still reaching, still rewriting. No, I said it quietly. I won't lie for you. His shoulders dropped slightly. Then what happens? I held his gaze. The truth. He leaned back, looked away. For the first time, he didn't try to argue, didn't try to explain, didn't try to control. He just sat there. And in that silence, I saw it. Not regret, not yet. Understanding, finally, that this wasn't fixable, that this wasn't containable, that this wasn't his to manage anymore. The waitress came back, refilled his coffee. Neither of us touched it. After a moment, he said something quieter, different. Linda's leaving. I didn't react. Of course she is. He nodded slowly. She took Tyler. Another fracture, another consequence, another piece falling into place. I stood up. This is the last time we meet like this. He looked up. What does that mean? It means the next time we're in the same room, it won't be by choice. That landed. Clean. Final. I turned to leave, then stopped, and said one last thing. The third line people later repeated back to me. You didn't lose everything. You just ran out of lies. I walked out, didn't look back, because I didn't need to. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. A message from Detective Harris. Charges are being filed Monday. I stared at the screen, then looked up at the dark road ahead, and one thought settled in. Next week, this wouldn't be private anymore. It wouldn't be family. It wouldn't be controlled. It would be public. And when it finally came out, everyone who had chosen sides would have to face what they defended. On Monday morning at 9:02 a.m., in a courtroom with 42 people seated and 3 rows of reporters I didn't recognize, my father stood at the defense table and said he had done nothing wrong. At 9:07, the prosecutor placed a stack of documents on the bench that weighed just under 4 pounds. If you've ever watched denial collide with evidence in real time, you know how fast a story changes shape. Before I walk you through what happened in that courtroom, take a second to like and subscribe if this story has stayed with you. And tell me in the comments, do you think people like this believe their own version of events, or just hope everyone else will? I arrived at 8:31 a.m. Early, deliberate, control. The courthouse in Cedar Falls wasn't large, but it carried weight. Stone steps, metal detectors, fluorescent lights that made everything look a little harsher than it was. Or maybe that was just the situation. Alan Callahan met me near the entrance. You ready? I nodded. Not because I felt ready, because readiness didn't matter anymore. This was happening either way. Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Family members, neighbors, a few people from church. People who had formed opinions before hearing anything real. Carol was there. She gave me a small nod. Different now. Not uncertain. Grounded. Linda wasn't. I noticed that immediately. Tyler wasn't either. Also not surprising. My father stood at the front with his attorney, Daniel Brooks. Well-dressed, composed, prepared. At least on the surface. My father looked contained, like someone holding himself together by routine. Hands folded, eyes forward. Not looking at me. Not yet. We took our seats. The room settled. The judge entered. Everything began. Charges were read, clear, structured, unavoidable. Multiple counts of identity theft, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraudulent use of financial instruments. Each count landed like a marker. Not dramatic, just precise. My father's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. Of course he did. That was expected. That was the plan. Deny, delay, reframe. The judge nodded. Proceed. The prosecutor stepped forward. Assistant District Attorney Melissa Grant, mid-40s. Calm, sharp. The kind of person who doesn't raise her voice, because she doesn't need to. She didn't start with emotion. She started with structure. Your Honor, this case involves a pattern of financial exploitation spanning approximately 14 months, totaling over $120,000 in unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent credit activity. No hesitation, no embellishment, just facts. She turned slightly. The defendant, Richard Cole, used a revoked power of attorney to access funds belonging to his sister, Margaret Cole, and subsequently opened multiple lines of credit using her personal information without her knowledge or consent. She paused. Let it land. We will present documentation, transaction records, digital access logs, and witness testimony establishing both intent and execution. Intent? Execution. Those two words defined everything. My father's attorney stood. Objection to characterization. Overruled. The judge didn't even look up for long. We're at preliminary hearing. Proceed. The prosecutor nodded once. Then she did something I didn't expect. She called the first piece of evidence. Not a witness, not a statement, a video. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered on, and there it was, the funeral, Kyle's video, my father, clear, visible, grabbing the passbook, laughing, throwing it onto the casket. It's nothing. Let it stay buried. The room didn't react loudly, but you could feel it, the shift, subtle but irreversible. Because that video didn't prove the crime, but it proved something else. Character, intent, disregard. My father's attorney stood again. Relevance, establishes state of mind. Overruled. The judge's tone was neutral, but final. The video ended. Silence. Not empty. Waited. Then the prosecutor placed the documents on the bench. Bank records, revocation notice, transition logs, credit reports, everything. Stacked, ordered, clear. She walked the judge through it step by step. Dates, amounts, signatures, IP addresses. Each point building on the last. No gaps, no confusion. Just a straight line from action to consequence. Then she said something that shifted the entire room. We also have documentation maintained by the victim prior to her passing. My chest tightened slightly. She held up a copy. My aunt's list, her handwriting, her records, 17 entries, all matching the bank data. Independent verification. Intent confirmed. This wasn't discovery after the fact. This was awareness before it. The prosecutor placed it down. Your Honor, the victim knew. She documented, she anticipated, she protected. And the defendant continued anyway. No emotion, just truth. My father's attorney tried again. Circumstantial, corroborated by institutional records. Overruled. The judge leaned forward slightly now, more engaged, more focused, because this wasn't abstract anymore. This was clear, clean, complete. Let me ask you something. When the truth is laid out piece by piece, with no room left to interpret, what does denial even look like? Because at this point, it started to look like something else. My father shifted slightly, for the first time. His composure cracked just enough to see it. Not panic, not yet. Pressure, building. The prosecutor continued. We will also present evidence of 5 separate credit accounts opened using the victim's identity, with contact information linked directly to the defendant. She turned slightly. Login activity confirms access from the defendant's residence. No ambiguity, no distance. Direct connection. Then she stepped back. At this time, we request that the court recognize the severity of the charges and proceed accordingly. She sat down. The room held still. The judge looked at my father, then at his attorney. Do you wish to respond? Daniel Brooks stood. He adjusted his jacket, composed again. Your Honor, while the prosecution presents a compelling narrative, we contend that these actions were taken within a familial context, without malicious intent. There it was. Reframe. Family. Intent. Softening. He continued. My client believed he was acting in the best interest of his sister, managing financial matters during a period of decline. Decline. That word again. But this time, it didn't land. Because the documents were already on the table. Because the timeline didn't support it. Because the revocation was clear. Because the pattern was undeniable. And because everyone in that room had just seen enough to know. The judge nodded slowly, then said something simple. We'll proceed. Not dramatic, not loud, just forward. And in that moment, I understood something completely. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. That part was done. This was about consequence. Public, structured, unavoidable. I sat there, hands still in my lap, breathing steady. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like I was part of it. I felt like I was watching it, like something my aunt had already set in motion was now finishing itself. Alan leaned slightly toward me. "This is just the beginning." I nodded. "I know." Because the hearing wasn't the end, it was the opening. The moment everything moved from private to public, from contained to exposed. And as the judge scheduled the next proceedings, one thought stayed with me. Clear, final. This wasn't going to end quietly. Not after this. Not with everything already on record. And not with what was about to be revealed next. At 10:16 a.m., on the second day of hearings, with the courtroom twice as full as before, and 2 local news cameras set up in the back, my father finally said the words I had been waiting for. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. And for the first time, no one believed him. If you've ever seen someone run out of ways to control the story, you know how different their voice sounds when it finally breaks. Before I show you what happened next, take a second to like and subscribe if this story has stayed with you. And tell me in the comments, do you think people like this feel regret or just loss of control? Because what I saw that day wasn't simple. I arrived earlier than before, 8:05 a.m. The hallway was already crowded. Whispers, phones, people who hadn't cared before, now suddenly interested. That's how it works. Truth attracts attention once it becomes undeniable. Carol was there again. This time, she didn't just nod. She hugged me. Brief, tight, then stepped back. I should have seen it sooner. I shook my head. You saw it when it mattered. She didn't argue, because we both knew timing changes everything. Inside, the courtroom felt different, heavier, not just with people, with expectation. The first day had introduced the facts. Today was about confrontation. My father sat at the defense table again, but something had changed. His posture. Less rigid, less controlled. Like the effort to hold everything together was starting to cost more than it could sustain. Daniel Brooks leaned close to him, speaking quietly, adjusting, recalculating. They both knew. The strategy from day one wasn't holding. The judge entered. Proceedings resumed. The prosecutor didn't waste time. Today, we will establish knowledge and intent beyond any reasonable doubt. Clear, direct. No space left for interpretation. She called the first witness, Karen Mills, branch manager. She walked through the account structure, the revocation, the flagged transactions. Every detail aligned with what we had already seen. But hearing it spoken, in that room, under oath, changed something. It made it real in a different way. Then came the digital records. An analyst from the bank's compliance team. IP logs, login times, device fingerprints. All traced back to one location. My father's house. No ambiguity, no room to shift blame. Then, the moment everything tipped. The prosecutor called Detective Harris. He took the stand. Calm, measured, professional. He described the investigation, the timeline, the warrant, the recovered data. Then he said something that shifted the entire room. During the search of the defendant's residence, we recovered a spreadsheet. My chest went still. A spreadsheet? Yes, he continued. A personal document maintained by the defendant, listing account balances, payment schedules, and projected usage of funds. Projected usage. Not confusion, not accident. Planning. He handed a copy to the court. The prosecutor approached, highlighted a section. Column labeled renovation budget. Line items. Kitchen upgrade. Flooring. Appliances. Total. $72,000. Sourced from Margaret. No last name. No explanation. Just one word. Margaret. The room didn't react loudly, but you could feel it. The shift. Again. Final this time. Because this wasn't interpretation. This was his own document, his own words, his own system. Let me ask you something. When someone writes down their actions in their own hand, what defense is left? Because at that moment, there wasn't one. Daniel Brooks stood, attempting to regain ground. Your Honor, this document lacks context. The judge didn't even let him finish. It has clarity. Overruled. The prosecutor didn't pause. She moved forward. Now, Your Honor, we would like to address the defendant directly. That was new. Direct confrontation. The judge looked at my father. You may answer. My father stood slowly. For a second, he looked like he might try to hold the line. Deny, deflect, reframe. But then, something gave. Not all at once, just enough. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. There it was. Not a denial, not a defense. A shift, the first crack that didn't try to hide itself. The prosecutor stepped closer. You didn't mean to open 5 credit accounts in your sister's name? He swallowed. I was going to pay it back. There it was again, that phrase, the one that tries to soften intent. The prosecutor didn't react. You didn't mean to continue withdrawing funds after your authority was revoked? He hesitated. Then, I thought. She cut him off. You thought what? The room held still. He looked around, at the judge, at the table, at no one. Then finally, at me. Just for a second. I thought it was still okay. That was the closest thing to honesty he had given. Not truth, but proximity. The prosecutor nodded slightly, then asked the final question. Did Margaret Cole give you permission to open those accounts? Silence. Longer this time. No shifting, no deflecting, no escape. Then, no. It landed. Clean, final, unavoidable. And in that moment, everything ended. Not the case, not the process, but the illusion. Completely. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. The judge made notes. The room stayed quiet. Not stunned, not shocked, just settled. Because everyone had reached the same place at the same time. Understanding. Clear. Simple. Irreversible. I didn't feel anything dramatic. No anger, no satisfaction. Just stillness. Like something that had been moving for a long time had finally stopped. Alan leaned slightly toward me. That's it. I nodded. I know. Because I did. There was nothing left to uncover, nothing left to reveal. The third layer was complete. Not just what he did, not just how, but why. And once that's clear, everything else becomes consequence. As the judge adjourned for the day, people started to move, quietly. No chatter, no speculation, just movement. Carol touched my arm. It's over. I looked at her. Not yet. Because one thing still remained. Not the truth. That was already out. The result. And as I walked out of that courtroom, into the cold air again, one thought stayed with me. Calm. Certain. Whatever happened next wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about living with it. On a quiet Sunday morning, 63 days after the first hearing, at exactly 8:40 a.m., I stood in front of my Aunt Margaret's grave with a small bouquet of white daisies and no phone in my hand. The final judgment had come in 3 days earlier. 3 years probation, full restitution of $120,000, permanent felony record. If you've ever waited for an ending you thought would feel bigger, you know how strangely quiet it actually is. Before I finish this story, take a second to like and subscribe if it stayed with you. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently, if anything at all? Because I've asked myself that more than once. The courtroom had been almost empty for sentencing. No reporters, no cameras. Just the people who were still there after everything. Carol sat beside me, Alan behind us. My father stood at the front, alone this time. No Linda, no Tyler. No performance, just consequence. The judge didn't speak for long. The facts had already been established. The intent had already been admitted. This was just the closing line. The court finds the defendant guilty on all applicable counts. No emotion, no emphasis, just final. My father didn't look at me, not once, not during the sentencing, not when the judge spoke, not when it ended, because there was nothing left to say. Afterward, he passed by me in the hallway, close enough that I could hear his breath. He slowed slightly, not enough to stop, just enough to say one sentence. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't need to. Some words come too late to carry weight. That was one of them. Let me ask you something. Is an apology still meaningful when it only comes after consequences? Or is it just another form of self-preservation? I don't know the answer for everyone, but I knew mine. The restitution process started immediately. Structured payments, court monitored. It would take him years, maybe longer. The house was sold, not by choice, to cover part of what he owed. Linda finalized the separation within a month. No drama, no fight. Just exit. Tyler stayed with her. I haven't seen him since. Carol and I talk regularly now. Not forced, not careful, real. Something steady grew out of everything that broke. Slow, but solid. I moved out of Peggy's house 2 weeks after sentencing. Not far. A small one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. 2nd floor. Window facing east. Morning light comes in soft. I like that. I went back to work full-time. Same clinic, same patients, same rhythm. Nothing about my life suddenly became extravagant. No big purchases, no sudden changes. Because here's something I learned. Security feels better than excess. And peace feels better than either. The trust remains untouched except for structure. Managed, planned, protected, the way my aunt intended. I visit her every Sunday. Same time, same place. No matter what. Not out of obligation, out of choice. I sit on the grass sometimes. Sometimes I just stand, depends on the day. I talk to her about small things. Work, the weather, things she would have noticed, things she would have cared about. And sometimes I say nothing at all, just stand there, because not everything needs to be spoken to be understood. There's a bench near her headstone, old wood, slightly uneven. I like it. It reminds me of her house. Nothing perfect, everything intentional. The first time I came back after everything ended, I brought the passbook. Clean now, no dirt. No weight, just paper. I held it for a while. Then I placed it gently against the stone. And I said something out loud, not for anyone else, just for her. You were right, simple, true, enough. Because she was, about everything. About him, about me, about what would happen, and about what mattered in the end. This story was never really about money, not at its core. It was about boundaries, about truth, about what happens when you stop protecting people who wouldn't protect you. There's one thing she wrote in her letter that stayed with me. I didn't understand it at first. Now I do. You are allowed to choose yourself. It sounds simple. It's not. Especially when the people you're choosing against are the ones who raised you. But it's necessary. That's the difference. One quiet morning last week, I made coffee the way she used to. Strong, no shortcuts. Sat by the window, watched the light come in. And for the first time in a long time, nothing felt unresolved. No questions, no what-ifs, just stillness. The good kind. The kind you don't notice until it's there. My father hasn't called again, not since that day. I didn't block his number. The door isn't locked, but I'm not holding it open either. That's the boundary. Clear, quiet, final. I don't hate him. That part surprised me. I just don't carry him anymore, and that feels lighter than anything else. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been told to stay quiet to keep the peace, remember this. Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's delay, and delay always comes due. That's my story. If it meant something to you, Leave a comment, not for numbers, for connection. Because someone else reading it might need to know they're not the only one. And if you want more stories like this, you know what to do. Take care of yourself. And more importantly, don't wait for permission to do it.